to Boo Chronicles. What's love got to do with it? Now, some of you are probably scratching your head because you saw me, Angie, and Nicola in the last few episodes, and we had another name. Well, you're not crazy. We did have another very similar name, but we decided we'd change it because we didn't want to share, and someone else had one very close. So this is the first episode of Boo Chronicles, but technically the fourth episode of conversation and dialogue about love and relationships. Well, today we have got a very special edition for you today.
We do.
It is all about boundaries, establishing boundaries. So Nicole is going to tell us a little bit about what boundaries are and kind of give the definition of what we mean by boundaries and why they are or are not important.
Thanks, Angie.
Okay, then.
Well, boundaries are something that we talk about all the time in reference to things and values that you erect around yourself for self-care to keep yourself safe. So they are a set of rules and regulations that you have for yourself. And a lot of times people think about boundaries as it relates to other people in terms of governing other people's behavior. But it really is to govern your own behavior in terms of establishing the things that are important to you to make sure that nobody is able to transgress those in relationships. And there are different kinds of boundaries. There's physical boundaries, intellectual boundaries, emotional boundaries, spiritual boundaries, and many others that you need to think about in terms of the things that are important to you so that as you are in relationship, you can govern yourself accordingly to with regard to the things that you're willing to accept in a relationship and the things that you're not willing to accept.
Okay, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I want to make it clear, we are not here to judge boundaries or put any kind of assessment on the boundaries that you choose for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It, to thine own self be true. What is a boundary for you may not be a boundary for someone else. By establishing boundaries, what you're doing is basically drawing a line in the sand for yourself about what you will or what you will not accept. We'll go from there in terms of what some of the different boundaries are and what some of the things that you should or you should not accept.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think you said it again. I said it first and you said it again, and I'm going to say it again, that it really is about the individual, because there is no right or wrong answers in terms of what works for you. Something that might be a boundary for me might be acceptable to you, and vice versa. And so within a relationship, it's important for, well, any relationship, not just a love relationship with a mate or a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend. It's any kind of relationship that you might have with a parent, at work, with your children. Boundaries are important, and as we said before, it's about self-care and making sure that you're putting those things in place to keep you safe and keep you in an environment that is healthy for you in every way, shape, and form. And it's very, very individualized. And it's even more individualized as you move from different kinds of relationships. And you also find that over time, with regard to your romantic relationships, that your boundaries might change from one person or one relationship to another as you change and grow and mature, and where some things may be more or less important to you over time. And that's okay, that you need to be forgiving of yourself and also very flexible with regard to how you change over time. But you don't want to get to the point where you're starting to sacrifice your boundaries in a way that would leave you unsafe.
So, yesterday or the day before yesterday, I was in a restaurant waiting to pick up food. And this young couple comes in, I would guess 25 and under, somewhere between 20 and 25 years old. And they ordered food. And while they were ordering food, the phone rang. And whomever it was on the phone expressed an interest in getting something for them too. And the guy was on the phone talking, and he's trying to get the order from the other person, and he said, "Do you want rice?" And the young lady said, "Yeah, he wants rice." And the guy looked at her and said, "Shut the F up. I'm trying to talk to him."
Wow.
And he didn't say F. I said F. He didn't say F. And he said it not in an angry way. It was a manner in which that's how he talks to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell that it was something that didn't make her comfortable, because immediately she looked around to see who was listening, and then she goes, and next couple minutes, the guy hands her the money and walks out of the restaurant, and she was waiting to pay for it and pick it up. And when it was her turn to pick it up, she walked up to the counter to the lady who was taking the money, and she said, "I don't know why he does that. He just doesn't, he just talks to me any kind of way. I don't know why he does that." And I thought to myself, because you let him. You've not drawn a line in the sand with regard to respect. Mm-hmm. So if he felt comfortable to tell you to shut the F up, and there was not even a hint of anger on either part, there was not even a hint of "I'm doing wrong," that means you've allowed and accepted someone, your mate, to treat you in a disrespectful manner. And clearly she didn't like it, or she wouldn't have made a bunch of hubbub and looked around and looked embarrassed, but she did not say anything to him. Mm-hmm. And that's an example of a non-established boundary, or a boundary where you've allowed yourself to be disrespected by your mate and you don't do anything about it. But you clearly have crossed the line. Mm-hmm. And crossed the boundary.
So that's interesting, because when you said she just kind of looked like, what he did kind of looked like it wasn't a big
whistling
deal.
Dixie.
Yeah, so it's obvious that was a regular part of their relationship in terms of how he spoke with her, and that was okay. I think the issue was because it was public, she was embarrassed. But irrespective of whether you're in public or whether you're in private, your boundaries should not change, whether you have an audience or whether you don't. And for her, it sounds like she was able to, or willing to, be accepting of bad behavior in private, but maybe not necessarily in public. Well, I take that back. She was accepting of it because she didn't say anything, right?
She didn't say anything.
Right. Now, maybe
she kind of gave a weak smile, like like an embarrassed smile.
Mm-hmm. Because she was embarrassed. And that's okay. But
I was embarrassed for her.
I bet you were. I am embarrassed, and I wasn't there.
And I wanted to go grab him, but I realized it was not my place. But
because
my
that was her fight.
What is wrong with you?
Right. But that was her fight, and
right.
And for her, you would have been setting up a boundary for her that she hadn't erected.
Yeah, fighting boundary. But anyway.
And no one can do that for you but you. You have to teach people how you want to be treated, and the way that you allow them to speak to you and to treat you in private, in public, is how you establish those boundaries. And you have to do it really, really early on. Can we talk a little bit about some of the signs that you see in terms of developing boundaries?
Well, another thing that I want to say is, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, you have to know who you are before you can establish boundaries. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know, you need to think about, you need to take the time to assess yourself. What do I like? What am I willing to accept? What values were taught to me that are important to me? What won't I accept? Because we've heard this before in other examples or other areas. But with regard to boundaries, no should mean no. And too many times we've heard people say, well, this is the last time, I'm not going to accept it anymore. Those idle threats mean absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
When you continue to say them over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, this is it. For real this time. This is the last time. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing it anymore. You're wasting your time. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be respected and you want your boundaries to be respected, you have to stand on what you say and mean what you say and make sure that they understand you mean what you say.
But I wanted to go back to something that you were saying about you really have to know who you are. And I think it's really important that you know who you are before you get into the relationship. Because a lot of times when you're faced with things and you have to deal with things on the fly, some of us, I know I'm the kind of person where I always think about the best thing to say, 5 minutes after it's time for me to say something. I'm like, I should have said this and I should have said that. You're a lot better on the fly than I am. You always got those real quick retorts. And I will have a quick retort like in 5 minutes, right? And so, depending upon your strength in terms of your ability to be able to go back and forth and to respond on the fly, sometimes you might let things slip because you're not prepared to deal with them in the moment. And then sometimes people are afraid to go back. And so you find yourself really feeling uncomfortable, kind of like the young lady you were talking about earlier, really feeling uncomfortable about it. And then maybe like, oh, well, after she got back outside in the car or whatever, oh, well, it's over now. I'll deal with it next time. And then the next time happens, the next time happens. And before you know it, you've got this unhealthy dynamic between the two of you all where you don't like when he or she does X, Y, and Z, and you've not established anything that says that. So they think it's okay, which is why he was able to kind of say it so flippantly. You have to establish those things in your mind early on, because if you don't know what it is that you want and that what you expect, they're not going to know either. You're not going to be able to communicate it to them because you don't know, and then because you don't know, they're not going to know, and then you end up with these unhealthy practices and this unhealthy ritual between
or acceptance of behaviors that you would normally not accept.
Say more.
Well, I'm thinking about some of the women that we did research on.
Uh-huh.
And for example, there's one woman that comes to mind, and she was in a relationship with this gentleman. Well, I wouldn't call him a gentleman, but we'll call him a gentleman. He, while they're living together, had 3 children from an outside source.
Wow.
While they were living together. Now, I would clearly say, no, not gonna happen. After baby 1, I'm out. Probably before baby 1, because there were things occurring before baby 1 came. But 3 babies. And the weird thing about it is she still stayed with him. So the question that I would say to you is what do you think it is that makes women stay with mates that have clearly crossed every boundary, whether they've established them or not? Why do they stay? Or why do they remain in that relationship?
Sometimes it's fear, a lack of self-esteem, thinking that they don't want to start over. And we've heard a lot through the research too. Well, I've been in it for 5 years. I've been in it for 10 years. I don't want to start over. And this we always ask them. So, but what do you really have though? You don't want to start over, but start over building what?
From what? Right. Start over from nothing.
Yeah, because right. I mean, with your example, like he had 3, but you don't want to start over with a man that don't have 3 side babies. Is that what you mean? You have to think about what it is that you're foregoing. A foundation built on what? A lack of trust. Endangering your health and safety. Not respecting you as an individual. You don't want to rebuild that. If that's the case, then you have to kind of step back and ask yourself, what am I really holding on to, and what am I afraid of? And sometimes, and we've heard this over and over again in speaking with women too, sometimes it's a fear of being alone. And I would venture to say that being alone with your boundaries in place is a place that people shouldn't be afraid to go, because that gives you time to assess what's important to you, rather than being alone with somebody who has no respect for you, is going to continue to put your physical health in danger, along with other things too. If you think about the financial ramifications that something like that had on this young man that had 3 children. And then you didn't say that they have children inside of them?
No, they didn't have any children.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's 3 baby mamas.
That's 3 baby mamas.
And 3 sets of child support and some other things. And so that kind of thing has a financial bearing on the finances of the household. And so when you accept that behavior, then you kind of get what you get. Well, and so what we're saying is you don't have to be in a position where you accept that. There's something that you can do about that, and that's accepting and setting healthy boundaries.
And not only that, what's love got to do with that?
Well, we talked about that last time, right?
What's love got to do with that?
Mm-hmm. That's not even nice for what?
There's several other examples of women who say, well, I am going to only date Joe, Becky, whomever, for no longer than 2 years until they want to commit and marry me or we set up household together. And 6, 7, 8, 9 years later, it's not happened. And so is it that they're afraid to lose? Are they that obsessed? What is it? What is it? And that goes back to what we talked about last week in The One. Because so many people think that this person who has totally violated every boundary that they've established for themselves, that doesn't meet the expectations that they have created for themselves long before they met that person, they're going to throw all that out the window because they think that person is the one. And if you recall, when we asked what that one was, it was because it makes them feel good. So how good is that feeling when you're in these examples, the one comes with 3 extras. So now it's the family and the one, and they're disrespectful to you, and they're not meeting your needs.
But sometimes they are meeting some needs.
Well,
See?
I guess that depends on what the priority is.
Yes.
Because yes, we have not talked about the sexual boundary, and that speaks to. I mean, I can give you an example of someone that we spoke with who was in a relationship with the one, and was so into that one that they allowed that one to convince them to bring another one into their bed. In other words, a threesome, whatever you want to call it, menage a trois. She hated it, but she did it. She did it because of her love for the one. Again, I ask, what's love got to do with it when you're crossing boundaries for yourself that you feel uncomfortable with?
Right, because she was hating it the whole time. That's interesting.
Oh, she hated it the whole time.
Yeah, well, we haven't talked about, as you said, the sexual attractions too, and many women stay because of the physical attraction that they have to their mate. And that, if that's something that is important to you, and you think that it is worth foregoing everything else that you deem as important to you, then that's okay for you.
You like it?
I love it.
Do you? However,
but don't get mad when
to your own self be true.
Yes, absolutely.
You can like it, but when you lay down at night by yourself and it's just you and the stars above and your thoughts, if it ain't working for you, you need to tell yourself it's not working for you, and not say, well, okay, but this person has a lot of money. I know they really, really like me. I know that, in a while they're going to change and I can talk them into the... No, it ain't going to happen. No, stop lying to yourself. To thine own self be true. You know yourself what is right for you and what is not right for you, and what you like and what you don't like. We're not standing here telling you it's bad to have a threesome. If that's what you like, do you. But if you feel uncomfortable, as she did, then you shouldn't have to do it. You should have boundaries that allow you to say no. Nancy Reagan? Just say no? You should just say no sometimes if it's not going to work. If you've got spiritual boundaries, there are women who I know who are Christians, who spent their entire life in church, enjoy church, want to be in church. They get with a mate that doesn't do church. Okay. That's between you and how you decide whether or not you want to be equally or unequally yoked spiritually. But that person shouldn't stop you from doing what you do, which is go to church. The same thing with financial boundaries. There's some women who have set and established for themselves a certain lifestyle that they want to live. Again, pick who you want to pick. But if you determined and established how you want to live a life financially, then you don't compromise. I guess at the end of the day, the word that we should introduce is let's not compromise on what we've established for ourselves and the boundaries, the line that we've drawn for ourselves.
I think there's some nuance to that, because I think in a healthy relationship, compromise is healthy. When you all are...
I'm not compromising on bringing somebody else into the bed. There ain't no compromise.
Not that. Not that. But what I said was in a healthy relationship, meaning you all have the same set of boundaries. So that if that's what you want to do, both of you all, that's a decision that you will make together. That's not my cup of tea.
Right, but that's not compromise.
Yeah, it is.
I don't get that.
It is. That is compromise to me. And I'm not talking about that piece. I'm talking about just healthy compromise with whatever, not that.
Okay.
In a healthy relationship, compromise is healthy. But that assumes that both of you all have the same shared values, and that you both have some concern about the health and safety of the other one as well. And so when you sit down and you can talk about the things that are important to you together, to you individually, and you're working in the same direction, then a little compromise on both sides is healthy, so that each person is able to walk away feeling good about themselves and feeling like they didn't compromise too much or put anything in place that would allow you to cross those boundaries. That's not healthy.
So what are signs of unhealthy relationships or unhealthy boundaries?
Sure. So I think one of the things that is unhealthy is not being able to say no. And, and being in a situation where you know that this person is asking you to do something, or the person is moving you in a direction that makes you uncomfortable, and you don't have the ability to be able to say no, to let that person know, this is not comfortable for me. This goes against everything that I believe in. When you get to that point where you cannot speak truth in your relationship and you don't have the ability to put the brakes on something because you feel at ease, then there's something wrong with that. That's unhealthy, and that's not a healthy boundary to have.
Or letting people define you.
Mm-hmm.
You are me, for example. I am a creative person. I got OCD when it comes to Christmas decorations and that kind of thing. I could not be with a mate that would say, no, we can't have Christmas tree. I just couldn't. And I would not and could not just say, okay. I mean, that's minor. That's a small thing. That's not by any means anything serious. However, you can't let people stifle the things that make you happy or that are important to you, or as we've talked about, your values.
Mm-hmm. What about if somebody asks you to do something that physically makes you uncomfortable? That's an unhealthy boundary too.
Like what? Say more. I don't understand.
Like what you were talking about earlier about maybe the threesome, or even something as simple as and maybe it is not sexually related, but something as simple as jumping out of a plane. I mean, those kind of things are really individual.
See, that's
decisions.
Compromise to me.
Oh no,
because
that's not compromise to me.
Because
you're not gonna convince me to jump out of a plane if I don't want to.
That's you. But I could be convinced. Like, for example, I was in Mexico not long ago, and I jumped off a cliff into the water. I don't know if it was the ocean. I don't know what it was. It was a bunch of water. There were some people, and again, these were not male-female or relationships in terms of dating relationships, but there were some women who were afraid, and myself along with others, we convinced her to jump. So in that instance, that's not necessarily a boundary, because she's afraid to swim and we convince her to jump off of a cliff into the water. So that's why I call that compromise. There's some things, if they're not baked in, deep-seated, value-oriented things, you can compromise on.
Right, but
she jumped.
It depends on what your boundaries are for health and safety. Because if I didn't want to jump off a cliff, I don't care what you said.
Well, see, that's you.
It is me. It's me. And that's how I establish my boundaries, which goes back to what we were saying before about how individual they are. Because something that you would deem not very, very sort of fungible in terms of the line, right?
Right.
Your line was fungible. Mine, in terms of my health and safety, are not, right? They're very solid, and don't you come over here.
But see, and that's your personality. Nicola is a black, white, yes, no. I'm a little, I can be fungible on things that are not what I call my core values. But some people are, it doesn't matter whether they're core values, whether they're fun things, it's wear the red shirt, don't wear the red shirt.
So one of the things that we kept hearing with the women we were talking to with regard to them and their relationships is that they saw their boundaries falling and they weren't doing anything about it. The thing that we kept hearing is that, well, I just can't. Well, I don't want to upset him, or I don't want to upset her, or I don't want to, to bring any kind of trouble to the relationship, because they were willing to accept that bad behavior because they didn't want to rock the boat. And what we're trying to say is that sometimes when you are in a boat that's rocking already, then at some point you need to like put on a life vest and either jump out or decide for yourself that I'm comfortable being in this boat that's rocking, and then accept all the consequences that go with that.
That's the thing, because you can accept the boat that's rocking and know that at some point the boat has a potential to turn over. But don't complain then when you're wet because the boat's turned over. And what we're saying and suggesting is you don't have to be wet. You can think about it before you even get in the boat. And if the boat has the warning red flags that we talked about, the boat seems like it's on the other side of the boundaries that you've established for yourself, maybe you don't want to get in that boat. Maybe you want to think about another boat. Catch a train, catch a plane, and wait for the next one.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we need to talk about also is how to set healthy boundaries. It's just really important that we were talking about the fact that you need to do this work beforehand so that you're walking into a relationship. We talked about before about heart and head, with your eyes wide open in terms of what it is that you're expecting from your mate or your partner. And one of the things that's really important is that you start early, that you make sure that you begin the relationship with an understanding about what's important to you and what is not acceptable.
You got to be honest about what you want and what you need. And it comes to mind, there's another example of one of the women we spoke with who really wanted children her whole life. She wanted to grow up and be a mother and have a house full of children. Well, she fell in love, fell being the operative word, with someone who did not want children. And to stay with that person, she went along to get along and is not a mother now and is beyond her childbearing age, quite honestly now, and regrets it because she allowed herself to have an unhealthy love and cross boundaries which were unhealthy for her by not explaining what she wanted. And now she's got to live with the consequences of those actions and regret it. It's a lifetime decision that she made for love. Again, what's love got to do with that?
And that's interesting that you say that, because that's that example is one of the ones that you cannot go back and fix. One of the things that you can also do in terms of setting healthy boundaries, I think, is to take a look at the things that worked for you in terms of your successes and also your mistakes. So in this instance, she can't fix it because, once you pass your childbearing age and you're past it. However, adoption and other things are still available to her. But if she ever wanted to have a child of her own, then certainly she can't go back and do that. But that's not always the case. But, when you are in a relationship and you walk away with some really healthy lessons that were good for you in terms of understanding what it is that you did right and wrong, you need to take those successes and those mistakes into the next relationship with you, not in terms of baggage, but in terms of understanding why something worked and why it was important to you, and then also understanding why it was a mistake to do X, Y, and Z, and why that was important to you as well, so that you're not repeating it over and over again. I used to tell my children all the time, build a memorial, so that if you see yourself going around in circles and you see, this memorial that reminds you of, oh, I was here before and it was uncomfortable, then that is a reminder that you're heading in the wrong direction and you need to make a mid-course correction. You don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And when you start to see the same signposts and the same examples and the same things happening in terms of either your response to something that sits with you in your stomach and says, I don't feel right about this, because you felt that way before and you know what's coming after that, then it's time to be able to take a look and to reflect back on what worked and what didn't work.
And not only that, and maybe you said this, and so I'll say it maybe simpler. If you find yourself right now in a situation where you know that you've allowed yourself to enter into a place that you didn't need to be, a place where your values, your boundaries have been compromised, don't just ignore it because you're there now. Like say, well, Angie and Nicola are saying this, but I'm already there. You know what? Get out. You can walk away. It's not too late. Stop the merry-go-round and get off.
Save yourself.